Me and some friends decided to head out for a day of fishing during our summer vacation. My friend David picked us all up in his truck, pulling our metal crank start boat in the trailer very early in the morning around 6 a.m. We made our way out of the city, down the freeway, and took the exit off to our favorite lake within our state. We found a dock to unload the boat and piled our way into it. David pulled the crank a few times after filling the tank, and we made our way out onto the water. We found a spot and stopped the boat right in the middle of the lake, dropping our lines into the water, and as anyone who's ever fished knows, waited. We felt some scratches on the bottom of the boat and got a little scared until turning around and seeing my friend Carl scraping it with his shoe. "You're scaring the fish!" David yelled. He quickly stopped and looked up at us with a nervous smile. We quickly heard the scraping again, but before we could turn around to shame Carl, the boat went flying upward like a whale had flipped under us, and as we came down, individually falling into the water, a large, scaly green monster covered in seaweed and moss caught Carl's whole body in its mouth before his toe could even touch the water. It disappeared just as quickly as it arose from the water, sparing David and I, letting us flip the boat and crank the start engine, leaving our fishing rods, bait, and friend behind. We left the boat halfway up the dock and hopped in David's truck, just as fast as the creature had swallowed our friend, slamming the doors the same way it slammed its mouth shut with Carl in it. We made our way down the freeway in silence until we heard a scratch on the bottom of the truck. My brothers and I decided to head out to the lake one misty evening in hopes to catch enough fish to feed ourselves that night and even sell at the market the next day. We loaded into our canoe and untied the rope from the dock. As we started paddling to the middle of the lake, we heard a fearful scream from somewhere on or very near the water. We ignored this, assuming it was just some goofy teenagers trying to play a prank. We sat and fished for a good hour, catching at least enough for our dinner, until I saw a fin sticking from the water, swirling around our boat. Before I could call off to my older brother about this unidentified creature, it hopped up, landing on 2 feet in the middle of our boat. It was a half-human, half-fish creature with webbed feet, scales all around its body, and a tentacle-filled head staring through me with its glowing blue eyes. It threw my brothers into the water, one by one, clawing into each of their skin with its claw-like nails. It then looked me right in my eyes and whispered, "Paddle, paddle, little rascal," until it dove back into the water, pulling my brothers' bodies with him, one by one again. I began to paddle back, just as it ordered me, hearing my brothers' screams and cries, similar to the ones we ignored earlier. I now sit here in this institution, 30 years later, not having spoken a word since. Before my mother died many years earlier than she should have, due to the stress this fateful event caused her, she begged and pleaded with me for any information, but I couldn't bring myself to possibly reimagine the creature by explaining it out loud. It had been a long week, and when I was off work Friday, I headed out to the nearest dock to my cabin with my rod and tackle box in hand. I casted my line into the lake and waited, hoping for a light rain or mist to come over the lake in hopes it would bring the fish to the surface. As I took a look around the scenery of the lake, I saw what looked like a man on top of the mountain facing me. He noticed my gaze and gave me a goofy overhead wave before jumping off the top of the mountain, landing flat on his face. I was shocked by what I had just seen. Before I could even process his psychotic action, he stood up and began walking around the perimeter of the lake towards me. The closer he got, I noticed this was no man, or at least not anymore. He was a ghostly figure, dressed in some sort of 1800s pilgrim attire. I stood up, quickly reeling in my line and gathering my bait and lures back into my tackle box. I slowly walked backwards off the dock, refusing to turn my back on the ghostly figure until he vanished into thin air. I turned around to run, doing the quickest 180 of my life, and he was standing right in front of my face, not staring at me, but instead right through me. I was frozen in fear, feeling like my feet were glued to the dock and my eyes were locked on his ghostly gaze. Just like his stare, he stepped forward, walking right through my cowering body as he made his way down the dock, falling right into the water. I sprinted back to my cabin and dove into my bed, hoping to sleep off this terrifying encounter like a bad dream. Months later, I revisited the cabin with my mother, and as we sat around the fire, she retrieved some old photos of her great-grandfather's pilgrimage that took place in the nearby town. In one photo, her great-grandfather stood next to a man with their arms around each other, and as soon as I recognized the man beside my grandfather from the dock months ago, the non-ghostly version of himself in the photo winked at me.